Hi, this is Swapnil Bharti, and we are here in San Francisco to cover DockerCon. And we have with us Banjot again. We have talked over phone, we have talked off record during dinner parties, but this is the first time we are sitting in front of camera and talking. So before we kind of deep dive into this interview, just tell us, what do you do at Docker?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Swapnil. I work on Docker's product portfolio. I lead the product management team for the Docker platform.
So we are here at the DockerCon, and I think this is, today was one of my favorite keynotes. There were a lot of energy.
That's great to hear.
Yeah, and there are a lot of announcements also. Yeah. But one of the highlight from my perspective was the federated, app. So can you talk about that? What is that?
Yeah, we were really excited to announce that. Federated app management is what is going to allow customers to now think about their containerization strategy across cloud providers. We heard very clearly from customers as they scale up and as they deploy more and more containers, they add more and more clusters. Now, you'd expect that in an on-premise environment, that as they add more and more of those clusters, they just need to keep track of where things are. Now imagine taking that to the scale of, now I've got a cloud provider in, say, EMEA, or I've got a cloud provider in the APAC region, I've got another cloud provider in, say, the US Southwest, and I've got to keep track of clusters that are being deployed and managed by other teams across different cloud providers, and each having their own clusters, maybe for different environments, for different applications, and trying to find an inventory of where all my applications are, ensuring applications reside in the right domains or in the right regions, on the right clusters, can be daunting for an operations team. And so for those folks that have to manage the growth of that journey, this is what gives them the ability to scale and do that with the group of operators they have today without having to add additional people to manage each of those clusters in each of those environments.
But when we talk about cloud in general, today everybody talks about hybrid cloud or multi-cloud. Mm-hmm. So aren't there already existing solutions where people can move around easily? Because otherwise it defies the whole purpose of multi-cloud.
Yeah, in most use cases though, you hear what customers are typically doing though is when they do a hybrid cloud strategy, they're having to define their application movement, and what they end up doing is first containerizing and then figuring out how do I move into a cloud scenario. Now, typical hybrid cloud deployments today don't actually move the application. You start net new in a cloud provider. And so what we're enabling folks to do is, with our modernized traditional apps journey, they can figure out how to take an existing traditional app, get it into a container, get the benefits of agility and security for that container, and then take that app and move it to a cloud provider. So the simplicity of our offering is what we think differentiates really the way Docker provides this versus existing solutions out there that really are still based in either an infrastructure or an operating system, or are specific to the cloud provider that you may be moving to.
And one thing that is I was wondering when I was watching Keynote also, and that was that most of the demos that I saw was about existing applications, mm-hmm. which goes back to MTA that you mentioned, because that was one of the, I have talked to a lot of other players in the space, mm-hmm. Red Hat, SUSE and all those things, and I think nobody has anything that packages every existing thing in a container which you can start your cloud journey. So that is exciting. But is it all about MTA, or it's also about if you're building a new application which has to be cloud native on day one?
Yeah, it's absolutely both. So earlier in the keynotes, we talked about how to get developers actually writing their new applications in Docker, even if they're not experts in Docker. And so we're marrying both sides of the house. Now, we want to make sure that for operators and for application teams, if they can start from scratch, then life is grand. It's really easy. You can just say, all right, let's start in a new environment, let's start with new applications. But in most cases, you have existing applications, and that constitutes 80% of your spend today. Now, I don't know a single CIO that got another $1 this year to spend on new development. So what we tell them is, take your existing dollars, shrink it. By containerizing your traditional applications, you can fund the innovation for your next mm-hmm. cloud-native applications. Mm-hmm. So do both. Mm-hmm. But now you can fund that new development as opposed to trying to work with squeezing out an extra $1 from your budget to actually make that development happen.
Another thing that I've watched in demo was that within seconds, you can spin, a cluster or whatever in Japan or in, But after GDPR, things have become, you don't, moving your, in a second, suddenly you're under US jurisdiction. So how do you tackle?
Yeah, I think it comes back to security policies that you have to administer as an operations team, whether you're app operations or infrastructure.
Right.
And so one of the areas of work for us with the federated app management is defining those policies. Which apps and which teams can deploy in which scenarios, in which environments. So I may spin up a cluster in Japan, but is everybody allowed to use that cluster? Probably not.
Okay.
So you can limit access and say, I want my role-based access controls to define and my governance policies to define a specific team that can deploy to that cluster and maybe a specific set of applications. Those are the types of policies that you'll be able to define now that you've got that inventory available to you and you've identified the users who are doing that deployment. And so that's what we're going to marry together in federated app management is all of the governance policies that we've shown today you can do at a single cluster level, we can now bring those up to a multi-cluster level as well.
That's great, but one thing that I missed in the keynote was there was not enough focus on security. Are you going to talk about it tomorrow, or it's understood?
Yeah, security has become a built-in component of everything we build, and so we are definitely making additional advancements and investments in the security of the existing portfolio. We didn't have any specific announcements for today or tomorrow on that, but as you can tell inside even the desktop scenarios where we're going to ensure that the templates that are approved by your organization are the ones that are published that your developers can consume. Or in a federated app management scenario, the specific applications that you can move or even see are governed by security policies. So we're continuing to weave security into the overall platform. We don't feel it necessary to have to build a security capability explicitly and say we're doing something specific around that, but we are building it throughout the application.
Yeah, because I remember the early days of Docker, security was the biggest concern. People are there, they're not secure, and that's why the whole OCI movement. And I used to talk to a lot of banks, and they're like, no, it's not secure now. So in terms of going back to federated, what kind of security? You did mention some, but what kind of security features are baked in to ensure not only things like GDPR, but a lot of financial industries, things like that, where. So, because you're giving a lot of power.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the ability to move applications around, the ability to see that inventory, the ability to control whether an application is running or not running, or highly available across environments. It's a very powerful, powerful capability. But as we always say, with great power comes responsibility. This is where we take the policy definitions that today you can see in UCP in the existing product. We're going to bring that to the federated app management capability. And so you'll be able to define policies such as whether someone can deploy or not deploy in a specific cluster. Now imagine adding compliance to that. So now if you have GDPR policies, not just doing that in a manual way, but defining that in a fully automated way. This application was built in this environment, signed by our teams in the US, therefore cannot be deployed in the London data centers, must be deployed in the US data centers.
Right.
And so all of that can now be fully automated just by virtue of the fact that you have full visibility to your software supply chain and to your deployment environments that you can access.
And in addition to that, what about a lot of compliances like HIPAA and all those things?
Yeah, that's where we really want the ecosystem and the security ecosystem to plug in.
Okay.
And we want them to provide that information. We're not going to be a compliance engine, but we want to be able to have those compliance and those regulations plug right into this capability.
So it has that capability built in, or you'll be building it in future?
We're building it now. So this is still an early tech preview of
it's a beta, right?
Yeah, we're going to enable the beta later this year, but this was really the early tech preview to show where we're heading.
And what is the expected deadline, ETA, before Christmas?
Well, we haven't talked about it yet. We are expecting this year to be able to show the functionality to customers, get their feedback. I mean, the most important part is the journey for containerization is still early. And even as we talk to customers who have 30, 40, 50, or 60 clusters out there, they are still early in determining the operating model. And so this brings another level of simplicity and capability, but we have to tie it very closely to how they're defining their operating model for clusters. Is it fully delegated control to the application development team, or is it centralized in a container as a service offering that all of the organization can tie into? We actually have a couple of great customers who are speaking here at DockerCon. One is Robert Bosch. They've done a fully delegated model. They take their clusters, they are deployed by the application, by the central team, but they're given full control to their application teams to do whatever they need to do with that cluster. In other models where we've talked to customers that have a much more control structure and much more regulated environments, they control everything that happens on that cluster. They provide a container as a service offering, which enables them to deploy containers, but you don't get access to the actual cluster. You don't know how many nodes you've got. They do a chargeback model. So those operating models differ pretty drastically in what we might have to do with federated app management. So we're going to work closely with customers on that over the next 6 months.
And the whole drive behind federated, of course, it should have come from customers. So what are the use cases or problems that you saw, and then you're like, okay, we have to do something, or you're like, oh, we must continue to innovate. So what was the drive?
We're very much all of our product strategy is driven by customers. We are absolutely a customer-driven company, and what we look for is, tell us what problems you're encountering. And what we heard very clearly from our existing customer base was, I have 60 clusters. I need to know where my applications are. And so that's problem space number one. But we heard also very clearly from them their strategy for where they want to be. I'm not going to be in my on-premises data center only. I'm going to leverage cloud providers where I can. And so if I have strategic data centers and data that I need to control, I'll put that in my data centers. But where I just need to extend my application to a geography that I don't have presence, I'll leverage the cloud provider. So in those cases, they may not even have the local expertise to spin up a Kubernetes environment. And so why try to manage that whole environment if you can get a cloud provider's hosted Kubernetes service? And so what we heard was there's directionally the possibility that many of these large enterprises will leverage not just local data centers, not just Enterprise Edition, Docker's Enterprise Edition on AWS or Azure, but that they'll also use a hosted Kubernetes service. And in those cases, that's what drove the discussion to, well, we have to think about this from the perspective of, it may not be Docker's full stack in every environment. It may be cloud providers offering. Now, you don't get all the same benefits of the signing enforcements and security policies that we can do with EE, but in an environment where you have to be agile about getting your applications deployed and for time to market, that may suit the business just fine. And in those cases, that's where the problem statement for federated app management was, how do I get control over all of those environments? If I don't give it to them, they'll get it anyways. They'll find a way to swipe the credit card and go to the cloud provider.
Right. With the federated app, are you doing it all alone, or you will also be working with some of your existing or new partners? So that how is that going to? How are you marketing?
Yeah, it's a good question. We're still working out exactly what the partner strategy around federated app management would be. So as of this moment, we're just defining the problem space and ensuring we have the right components of the solution. I think in every case where we've gone to market, we always make sure that our ecosystem can participate with us. So whether it's our development of Docker EE itself with Swarm and the ability to do plugins with Swarm, or the ability to do certified applications running on top of Docker Enterprise Edition, or now with Kubernetes, certified plugins for storage and networking. Those are all places where we want the ecosystem to work with us. We're not going to solve every problem. We're a platform, and honestly, we're a community that's trying to solve this jointly.
Right. How much of this work will be open sourced?
It's a great question. We're working upstream with the Kubernetes community on kubefed, which is the API that defines this interaction. Now, outside of that, we're still investigating what parts of the solution we want to open source and enable the ecosystem and the community to advance with us, and what parts are really intellectual property that Docker is going to maintain. We haven't determined yet. I admit, this is still very early for us as we think about this problem area and the solution itself.
Yeah, just open source everything. That is the best.
I mean,
I've been an open source advocate, so just open source everything and we'll figure out a business model around it.
We've done a lot of it already. So
right.
We do take that advice to heart. Our community means a lot to us.
Right.
And they've done great work for us as well. And together, we hope we can do it with them.
Right. Anything else that you think that, we should have talked about that and we did not even touch upon that?
Well,
I mean, I can sit with you whole day and we can talk for hours.
I'd love to tell you more about all the customer adoption we've seen. the hockey stick growth we've seen in customer environments as they've gone to production. Just in the last 3 or 4 months since we've released Docker Enterprise Edition 2.0, we've just seen a huge change in how quickly organizations can ramp up. Operational models are now well defined. The ability to support these environments, if you talk to the folks at Bosch, they'll tell you the number of administrators they have operating their entire container platform. It's incredible. So I think it'd be great to do follow-up discussions on how well this model scales.
Right.
The business impacts of that have just been tremendous, and that's why you see 5,000 people here today. We've got just a huge number of enterprises. 5,000 people here at DockerCon.
Awesome.
So.
Initially, when I was looking at I was standing at the keynote door and I saw only 50 people, and I was getting nervous. Even the
you didn't look behind you.
No. Even the security guard, he said, we have a space for 7,000 people, and I don't see that much. So when I went inside, and I started taking pictures, and by the time Steve came to a stage, before that I took one more picture, and I saw the whole room was full.
Yeah.
I said, what did you guys spin containers and just brought all the people? Where did all the people magically came from? Maybe
auto-scaling, right?
I think they were on the registration line. They were just standing there. So they were coming up there.
Up everywhere.
That was amazing. I'm like, wow, where did people come from?
This is auto-scaling at its best.
Exactly.
We can do chair auto-scaling.
Right.
We can do conference auto-scaling. We're going to replicate container methodologies everywhere.
Right. So since we have lightened the mood a bit, let's stop talking about containers and Docker. Let's talk about you for a bit.
Okay.
When you're not doing technology, when you're not doing Docker, what do you do in your free time?
Oh, what do I do? What free time? Boy. So I have 2 wonderful children and my wife. We actually, as a family, we love to unplug. We do a lot of hiking.
Okay.
My kids and I love to go biking. We do a lot of biking in the DC area. So I live out in Bethesda, near DC. And we spend a lot of time out there actually just taking in a lot of the culture in the DC area. Now, outside of the chaos that might be in the US government, in the DC metro area,
because I am also from it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous area. So we're really starting to take advantage of the local community. We do a lot of, my kids are involved in a lot of sports, baseball, swim, dance practices. I mean, just a lot of extracurricular activities. I myself, I'm a person who loves to be outside, and so where I can play tennis, play basketball, come to networking events. I love to meet people.
No, we don't want to talk about work for it.
No, even outside of work.
Yeah, but I've also heard you're into cooking as well.
I do
just
cook.
like me, you cook a lot.
That's right. Actually, you're a better cook than I am.
The thing is that we both live in, but we should be doing some get-together.
That's right. We need to do a potluck.
Yeah, we should do. Actually, we should plan.
We could even do a chopped.
Yes, we must. Now the weather is good.
Yeah.
So, but
right.
DC weather you can't trust.
You never know when it's going to go bad.
It's going to happen.
That's right.
But the weather we should try some. So what all do you make?
Let's see. My latest and greatest.
Innovation.
My latest and greatest innovations. Let's see, for the last couple weeks, I've been doing a recipe around roasted chicken. There's a recipe I have called $1 Million Chicken.
Oh, really?
Now I admit I got it off the internet.
Okay.
But I think I've perfected it. I can perfectly roast that chicken tender with a nice creamy glaze on top. Roasting has become one of my favorite pastimes.
Okay.
It's my go-to backup when the kids are hungry and I need to get something out, not quickly, but
exactly.
It's a very methodical method. I start it early in the afternoon, and I get a nice chicken done by the evening. My wife has taught me masala chicken, so she's taught me a very nice masala chicken recipe. I haven't mastered that. It's not as good as hers.
Right.
And actually, my latest craze in the house is now using our Instant Pot. So we have an Instant Pot. I use it for everything.
Right.
So we cook dal, chili. Short ribs. I've put almost everything in there. So that's my favorite experimentation right now.
Awesome, perfect.
Yeah. I want to hear your recipes though.
Yeah, that's next time. let's keep it for the next session. Okay. Let's keep the focus on you for this time.
Okay.
So anyway, it's nice talking to you once again, and it's nice being on camera together.
Yeah,
and hopefully we'll see you again next time.
I hope to see you locally.
And we will talk more about where Docker is heading in future.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Swapnil.